So the last method we used to get rid of this $100,000 overhead overapplied factory overhead amount works, but it's really oversimplified. Most companies will choose to use it because it's easier, it takes less time, it's simple to do. However, we could make an argument that it's not very accurate because this idea of overhead doesn't strictly flow through to an income statement, right? There's parts of the overhead that get allocated to work in process that make their way through to finished goods and then eventually to the income statement. But the argument is that the amount you've overapplied didn't all make it through the income statement, so logically some of this 100,000 should still be on an inventory account. And that's the rationale behind this method that says take the ending balances that were given and we're going to prorate this $100,000 based on some of the overhead still sitting in work in process, some still sitting in finished goods, and some having made its way through to the income statement. Now what's important to note here is that the way we're going to prorate it is based on the ending balances here. These would be the ending balances we'd find in a trial balance. And it's the amount before we have prorated any of the 100,000. Okay, so the second column here simply says of this 250,000, 72,500 is overhead. So we know that in work in process we would have materials, labor, and overhead. So 72,500 is the amount of this work in process that is overhead that was allocated throughout the year before we found out we had this issue. Okay, so this method says take these ending amounts and find out how much they are as a percentage of the total when you add them all together. So I'm going to take each one individually and I'm going to divide it by this total, and the total is all three of them added together. So you can see the work in process makes up 20% of these three items, and I'd use that same formula to find out how much the 150 is of the total and the 850. So you should always have a control total down here to make sure you're applying the right amount, 100%, so I know that's accurate. And what I'm going to say now is of the 100,000 that's overapplied, 20% of it goes here, 12% goes here, and 68% goes here. So I could take this amount here and multiply it by the $100,000 overapplied overhead that we're dealing with. Okay, so that's the total amount of the overhead that's going to be disposed of. So remember now watch how much different this journal entry looks. Is we're going to debit manufacturing overhead allocated for the 100,000, and we're going to credit not cost of goods sold we will credit, but only for 68,000. We're going to credit work in process. So the argument is that it's too large of a number because we've overapplied some amount. And we're going to credit finished goods because the finished goods are overvalued by this amount, and we would then credit cost of goods sold for the amount of 68,000. And that right there is the journal entry you would come up with using this second method, prorating based on the ending balances before any overhead allocation.